Welcome to the Agents of Innovation podcast, where we feature conversations with entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and artists. Okay, welcome to episode 120 of the Agents of Innovation podcast. I am your host, Francisco Gonzalez. We are located here today at Strike's Cigar Lounge in Boca Raton, Florida. But that's not where my current guest is from. He's actually visiting us here today. And my current guest is Ronak Patel. Ronak, welcome to the Agents of Innovation podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you here in South Florida. I see you more often than not in Florida than anywhere else, even though you're from the great state of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Well, Ronak, I want to first start this off by reminding our listeners that if they are just listening to this podcast on Apple Podcast or Spotify or any of the other hundreds of podcasting platforms out there, they can also watch this podcast on YouTube. We're video recording this today, and so if you go to YouTube and just put in the search bar, Agents of Innovation Podcast, you'll find us. This is now episode 120, and no matter where you're watching or listening, if you could hit the like button, if you could subscribe to the podcast, and also make some comments. We'd love to hear what you think about this episode. So definitely comment on any of those platforms. If you're on Apple, rate and review us, 5 stars only, please, right?
Yeah.
And then let us know, and that'll really help the podcast have more reach, so that the stories of people like Ronak Patel that you're about to hear will reach more listeners and viewers as well. And of course, if you like what you hear, share it with a friend, a family member, somebody, so that way more people are getting this. All these, Ronak, we live now in these amazing digital times, and we're going to talk about that because this man is the owner of, what is the name of your company again?
Patel Digital.
Patel Digital. Yeah. And so he is very familiar with the fact that we live in such digital times. It's so easy to pull your phone out and share this through the podcast platforms, through YouTube. Just share it on a text message or whatever. So it's very great, and that really helps us reach more people. So Ronak Patel, first of all, he's an American entrepreneur and activist, and as he mentioned, the founder of Patel Digital and Innovation Publishing. Yeah. He has met all sorts of people, members of Congress, governors, the Vice President of the United States, all sorts of public figures, and he has a book that he published in 2021 at the ripe age of 21 years old. I'm holding it here. It's called Generation Startup, Become the CEO of Your Life. And you know what? When you hear of a 21-year-old writing a book, you're like, I mean, what do they really know about being the CEO of their life, right? At 21. But let me tell you, I actually read this book this week, and it is fantastic. And many of you might know, I published a book. Yeah. By the way, Ronak, a little bit thicker.
Super awesome. Yeah.
This is just years of life and gray hairs and everything. But the American dream is a terrible thing to waste. So if you don't have either of these books, these are great books to get. And this, if you're a listener to the podcast, 100 Agents of Innovation share their fearless journeys in today's economy. That's the subtitle of my book that's out. So 45 different people who have been on this podcast are in this book, and we are continuing the journey and continuing to tell people's stories, including Ronak Patel here today. So Ronak, what's interesting is you're 23 now. Mm-hmm. You're an entrepreneur. Yeah. We're going to get into the fact that you just got into medical school, so congratulations.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
So we're going to get into all this with your story, but what's really amazing to me is, I wrote this book with the words, the American dream is a terrible thing to waste. And I think when you hear Ronak's story, you're going to understand that this man has not wasted his time or the maybe time of his parents, who actually came here as immigrants from India. Yeah. Neither one of them knew each other, right? And came here. Mm-hmm. So Ronak, tell me a little bit about your parents' story, where they came from, where they landed, how they met, and what their early times were here in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. So both of my parents are from India. They immigrated to the U.S. in the late 90s, and they got married in New York, and that's where they met each other, in the New York, Jersey area. and they both started out working at Dunkin' Donuts, minimum wage jobs.
I love me some Dunkin' Donuts.
I mean, yeah, they were working 14-hour shifts every day, just hustling. And after they got married, they eventually saved up to buy their first Subway in New Jersey. They ended up selling that and moving to Pennsylvania, where they found other business opportunities. They bought their first Subway in Pennsylvania in 2007, and then they expanded from there, and now they own multiple businesses and franchises in the food and beverage space.
Wow. So it's funny. I feel like Ronak, stereotypical.
Yeah,
sense,
very,
right?
very.
Indian immigrants who come here and work at places like Dunkin' Donuts, Subway,
Absolutely.
all these types of places. But then they didn't just work there. And you were telling me they worked minimum wage jobs. What was this, in like the 1990s?
Yeah.
And then they, by the way, people, minimum wage jobs in the 1990s were like, about $5 an hour. Maybe, I don't know if they were in New Jersey. That's what they were in Florida. Pretty similar.
It was probably around there.
Yeah. So they came here. What a path to get to the United States. They left family behind.
Oh yeah.
They were how old?
I think that they were like late teens, early 20s, so very young. Like, think about, you being in college and leaving your country and, all your family and friends.
Yeah, and so they came here. They landed mostly in New Jersey and New York.
Yeah.
Eventually moved over to Pennsylvania. What I like about their story, too, is they opened up a Subway franchise, or ran, I don't know if they opened it up, but they ran a Subway franchise in New Jersey.
Yeah.
What was the problem in New Jersey?
Yeah, so they basically broke even. It wasn't as profitable as they thought it would be, and so they had to sell it. They broke even, like I said, and to look for better business opportunities, they looked at neighboring states, and they ended up in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so they ended up in Pennsylvania, where they then opened another Subway franchise.
Yeah.
And then how many more did they open? And tell me about all the things they own today.
Yeah, so they own, 4 other Subways. They own a Sunoco gas station.
Wow.
And some other investments.
And so what's interesting a little bit about their story, too, is they went from being the people who worked in maybe the most entry-level position in places like Dunkin' Donuts, making minimum wage, just 25 or so years ago.
Yeah.
And today, they went through the steps of maybe making into a management position and a franchise owner, a franchise that was not successful. They closed it. They moved to another state, opened the franchise of the same company, Subway, and which those franchises offer people a lot of opportunities. And Subway restaurants are everywhere, right? I mean, they're even in gas stations now, right? And so I really like that they did all that, and now they own a gas station.
Yeah, they literally started from the bottom. I mean,
they're doing very well now, and they have 2 incredible sons. Their eldest is right here, and let me tell you a little bit. I mean, tell us. So Ronak, I'm going to go back and ask you a question.
You sure?
What was your first job in life?
So my first job was, I was 16 years old, and I worked at my parents' Subway for about 3 months over the summer.
Well, so shocker, right? His first job was Subway. What's your favorite Subway sub?
The Veggie Delight.
The Veggie Delight. I always liked the Italian cold cut combo. Yeah. Although sometimes I vary.
That's a popular one.
Yeah. So sometimes they don't have that one anymore, and so I go with the other Italian, the Italian BMT.
Okay. Yeah.
Love that. I was actually just in a Subway. Sorry, this is going to turn into a commercial for Subway.
Yeah. Right.
I was just in one off the Yeehaw Junction.
Yeah.
In right off the Florida Turnpike, and. Is this something new? Like I was like, I go to Subways once in a while, but not all the time. But they had like these like premium. There was like 10 new premium subs that I'd never heard of. So maybe it's an experiment off the Yeehaw Junction.
I don't even know. Yeah,
it was crazy. I was like, okay, I guess I'll go with that one.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's great. So that was your first job. What were your ages? If you're allowed to tell me, I don't.
I was 16 years old at the time. I mean, prior to that, I would help my dad with like paperwork and whatnot. I would shadow him. I would count money for him and whatnot. But this was like my first like real job.
Yeah. So I just want to go back to that as well, because I was reading in your book that in the 8th grade,
Yeah.
this man started a LinkedIn profile, a LinkedIn page. And, there's a lot of college students today that I know, and even some just out of college, that, like, don't even have a LinkedIn page yet, which they should. Like, everybody needs
they
to
should
get on.
probably teach a course just on that.
Yeah. And it's funny because people kind of go back and forth on whether, like, LinkedIn, what you need. But I've always found, particularly in the last 5 or 6 years, that it's really great to connect with people professionally on.
I agree.
Like, there's people maybe you don't necessarily want to be Facebook friends or follow them on Twitter
Or even Instagram. Yeah.
or whatever. But you're like, hey, like LinkedIn is like the professional place where there's not as much of the political bickering going on or anything like that. There's not as much of all that. It's just like people doing what they do in their businesses and maybe sharing what some of their businesses are doing. But more to me, it's almost like a modern day Rolodex.
Yeah, no. I think it's one of the best tools that people can use, and I would recommend that everyone start one. I actually use LinkedIn to find my first client for my social media marketing company that I would later start my senior year of high school.
That's awesome. Was that I'm trying to keep up because, by the way, when you read this man's book, there's so many little entrepreneurial things that he did, little and big.
Yeah.
And so was that the first one? What was the first thing you did?
Okay, so
from an entrepreneurial perspective, and how old were you?
Yeah, so the first real, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur probably late middle school, early high school, and when I was 16 working at Subway, I knew I didn't want to work a minimum wage job. I knew I didn't want to be making sandwiches. So I knew that I could do more with my time. And that's why I only worked there for a couple months. But so what I did, I knew that social media marketing was becoming a big thing. Instagram was just taking off. And this was actually before Instagram ads became a thing. I originally made a page wanting to create just like a normal content page, but I actually ended up meeting an influencer with over 1 million followers, and he had all these followers, but he didn't know how to monetize them. So basically what I did was I connected him with a bunch of small businesses on Instagram, and I would take a commission from the marketing costs. And because Instagram ads didn't exist at the time, I was fulfilling a need in the market.
That's awesome. Well, so they didn't exist, and then tell me, where did that end up for you? Like how long did that particular job last, and what skill sets did you build that maybe helped you for your next step?
Yeah. I did that for about a year, and I think the biggest thing I learned were sales skills, customer service skills, because I was reaching out to business owners all over the world, really. I mean, I was dealing with people in Europe and Australia. I was getting euros in my PayPal. I was getting dollars. Yeah, I was getting all kinds of currency. And I was getting it all to my PayPal account. I was actually too young to open up a bank account on my own, so I had to go in and open up a bank account with my dad and then connect that PayPal account to that bank account.
Wow.
But I think sales is a really big thing I learned there. And then when I was 18, my senior year of high school, I heard of people starting these different types of marketing agencies, and I knew that from my background with Instagram specifically, I could offer that as a service. So I reached out to one of my classmates' dad that ran a pretty big manufacturing company. They manufacture hats and T-shirts and apparel with college logos and whatnot on it. It's called Legacy, and they merged with another company called League. But anyway, I messaged the CEO on LinkedIn. He invites me to do a presentation in front of, it's like the vice president of marketing, the art director, a couple social media people, and the CEO. So this is like my first sort of professional pitch. And it was March of 2018. I was a senior in high school. And I was able to get that deal and do consulting for that company. And then through that, I still wasn't happy with what I was getting out for the time I was putting in. And I didn't necessarily enjoy the nuances of like managing, doing the day-to-day work of managing pages. So I knew that e-commerce was also a booming thing at the time. There was another young entrepreneur back then that like made over $1 million selling fidget spinners online, and I knew that e-commerce was becoming a big thing. So later that summer, about June of 2018, I launched my e-commerce store with a partner from high school, and we sold things like merchandise. We bought things from China and then sold them from like Alibaba and whatnot. And I didn't know this, but later that same summer, I was able to offer e-commerce building services to another entrepreneur in the local area. So I made some profit from the e-commerce store, but the real value was actually learning, building that e-commerce store. And I would later offer that to a variety of companies, political campaigns, and whatnot.
That's awesome. I think that's a real testament in what some might call learning by doing and testing and experimenting. And I think that's one thing that's kind of lost on a lot of people, in that you could have seen that entrepreneurial pursuit you did, the first one where you managed Instagram pages, and it didn't, like you said, it was fine, but it wasn't really worth your time for what you made, and maybe the time you wanted to put into it, and maybe what you were interested in doing, and
exactly.
You kind of learned, okay, this isn't exactly what, but I built this. I found through doing this, I found this other way to make some money, building an e-commerce site.
Yeah.
And while that was good for me and my business partner, my friend, right, at the time, is what you said. What you really found was the value of being able to know how to do that, so that now people that had businesses that were selling a lot more merchandise, or a lot more products, they now could employ you. You're walking into their business, and you're now the engine that's going to get them to sell things, and now you are a valuable commodity to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think that's a really cool thing, that along the path of entrepreneurship, as you're testing and doing things, and maybe things are side hustles, you start to find what maybe doesn't work, but also some things that you never even knew about had you not pursued the thing you were doing. Yeah. And so I think that's really cool. So, I mean, one thing I've seen on this podcast, I mentioned it, in my book that I'm going to keep promoting, The American Dream is Terrible Thing to Waste. I have a whole section in there, 10 common characteristics of the entrepreneur, and one of them is that entrepreneurs learn by doing. That Absolutely. Is a consistent theme I have seen, and we're witnessing it right here in your story. Yeah. And what's amazing when I'm reading your book, Generation Startup, I'm thinking, wow, I'm just reading all your little stories, and you just see the connections. What's interesting is you see the connections later.
Absolutely,
right? You couldn't write this story forward.
No, you're can't.
Looking at it from today's perspective. Absolutely. And saying, oh, this led me to this, and this led me to this. And I think
you can never know until you actually do it. Yeah.
Yeah, we can all think about things in our own life that, or maybe it was just simply, while in the midst of doing something, you met somebody important. Like, this has happened to you several times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? You've met many different people across the way that helped. Maybe they hired you for something, or they helped Absolutely. Make you a connection with somebody else. All these sorts of things. So I think that's a really cool thing about your story here. The other thing that I want to mention is you are somebody who is very, very good at building relationships. People say that about me too.
I appreciate that. Thank
right?
you.
But
I think you are
for
too.
somebody who's 23, it's even more remarkable.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And so it's funny. You have a great chapter in here about building relationships, and I have to read one line to the audience here, because he's talking about in 2020 flying down to Orlando, where I was living at the time, to attend a fundraiser for a young congressional candidate he supported. I won't mention the name, but the person's been on my podcast before, so you can figure that one out. And anyway, me and another friend of mine had actually co-hosted this fundraiser. And Ronak comes down from Pennsylvania with another friend of his to attend. And he mentions this in here. And then he says, months later, I attended another conference in Orlando. Before the conference, I messaged 2 individuals from the fundraiser to set up informal meetings with them. One of these individuals was a fantastic connector who was able to invite me to a private event where I met public figures and networked with other potential clients. And I was reading this week, and I was going, is he talking about me? And I don't mean to brag on myself, but he's the one that said it.
No, I was talking about
And then
you.
he also talks about another friend of ours, another gentleman from the fundraiser, happened to be a healthcare entrepreneur that owned multiple pharmacies throughout Florida. Some of us know who that is. So anyway, that wasn't me. But anyway, so that's pretty funny. But the reason I actually read that is that's the context that I met Ronak. I met him at this political fundraiser in Florida. He came down because, one, he wanted to meet the candidate who was running. He had a friend that came with him. He wanted to meet some people there. He met some people there. He met me amongst many other people. And then months later, there was another event going on in Orlando, a conference. And you meet me and you meet all these other people at that event. But it's funny because that week, I literally only met you one time before then, I think, right?
Yeah.
And we were actually doing a private event at a friend's house of mine. So we had like a list of people. He wasn't on that list. I want to say that because I didn't know you.
Yeah.
And you'd be on that list today.
Yeah.
For sure. But a mutual friend of ours invited you to hang out and meet up with us one evening that week before the private event. And then that person actually suggested to me, maybe we should invite him to the little thing we're doing at the private house. I said, all right, yeah, let's. I don't know, it's not my house, and let's see, let's evaluate. But then he was such a cool guy, and got to really spend some time with him.
I appreciate that.
Hey, come to the event. Right?
Yeah, I remember that.
But what I really like about your chapter on relationship building is you can talk about. I really like what you talk about, how sometimes people go to networking events just to network or just for transactional reasons.
Yeah.
Tell me, so I'm going to have the first question, then I'll come back to it.
Sure.
First question is networking events versus the kind of events you go to where you actually network. Can you explain that to people?
Yeah, absolutely. So when people think about networking, sometimes they think of events where they're forced to network, or it's meant for networking, where you have a bunch of insurance, finance, and mid-level law executives just passing around business cards to each other because those are the only people that are there.
Yeah.
And then the networking that I do, I actually don't really go to events that are marketed as networking events. I just go to events that are industry specific to industries I care about. Like maybe it's politics, maybe it's technology, maybe it's healthcare, maybe it's a political or nonprofit cause I care about, maybe it's a physical activity cause that I care about. One of my first clients for my web development company, that same summer of 2018, I met the one guy at the gym. So it's the point that I'm trying to make is that networking is about building relationships with people, and you build genuine relationships when you connect with people that have like-minded interests as you. It's not so much as, I want this from this person. It's more so, I want to be around these people. I want to work with these people. I think like these people, and I think we can add value to each other. And I think those relationships lead to good and purposeful professional and personal relationships.
Yeah, I think that could not be said any better. And because a lot of times, especially if you're a young professional or something, right, you're constantly being marketed to with come to this, and they specifically say networking event.
Yeah.
And so that those tend to be very transactional events. Honestly, I think they attract transactional people or people that come with a transactional mindset.
Yeah, and like, do you really think that influential people are going to go to those events?
Right.
No, you're more likely to meet influential people at like a nonprofit fundraiser, political fundraiser, a cause that they really care about that you can also connect with them on.
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest with you, the story of this podcast, I didn't meet, I just started meeting interesting people by the things I was involved with.
Yeah.
The work I was doing,
I think that's the best way to do it.
Policy organizations I worked for. I would meet donors to those organizations.
Absolutely,
I would meet people who came to, music events I liked, right? Like other nonprofit charity events I might have attended, things I was involved with. I think anything you have interest in, like I'm a tennis player.
Right.
There's anywhere you go, you're involved like a tennis community, right? Like
great examples. Yeah.
I got to give a shout out my friend Dan Lesniak, who's a big time real estate guy, real estate coach, and everything. He has a great podcast too. He's been on this podcast actually, but Hyperfast Agent is his podcast, and I listen to a lot of the stories of different realtors, real estate agents, and it's funny you hear some of these people. They actually say, like I remember hearing one guy, I don't remember his name, but he was like, "Hey, I like golf. I want to be the real estate agent for anybody at my golf club, right?" And by the way, he's building the relationships with people first through golf. He's probably going to build those relationships regardless of getting any business. Because like you said, the people there at the golf club have a like-minded interest with him, golf. They might talk about watching golf.
And he enjoys it.
Yeah, they enjoy it. It's just, that's the environment you're in. So why not be the real estate agent for those people? When they are looking to buy or sell a home, they know, oh, hey, that guy Dan or whoever, right? He's the real estate agent. Let me go talk to him. So you make yourself well known in the communities. Maybe it's a church community, whatever it is, whatever people are involved with. And so that's what you do. And you've been involved. You've been involved in a lot of political and policy things. That's how we kind of connected. And so anyway, really great. But you do all these entrepreneurial things. So I think you mentioned this in your book. You started going to these events just because you had an interest in learning more about public policy,
right? Exactly.
Maybe supporting political candidates. And while you were there, you were like, "Oh, these people need websites,
right? Exactly.
These people need somebody to manage their social media pages,
exactly."
And well, they know me, so why are they gonna listen? Why are they gonna hire some person they don't know who just came in to talk about websites or something, right? You're the one hanging around at the conference all the time that knows everything.
Yeah. Business is about people, and people are everywhere. So be around the people that you want to be around.
Also, you make it a very important point in this chapter on relationship building. We should all be asking ourselves, how can we add value to other people?
Absolutely.
The value add might benefit us financially. It might benefit us with business, but that's not the number one reason to add value to people. It's the simple, good thing to do to add value to people. It could be, Ronak, it could be that I was sitting there hanging out with you in Orlando, and we already have 50 people coming to this private house party, but I see some potential in a young person, and I say, hey, you know what? There's a lot of people in the room we're going to be in tomorrow night that you would really, it would be an added value to you to meet. So maybe that's just a small way, like somebody can do that for other people, right? And then you're like, hey, maybe there's ways you're adding value to me that I'm not expecting, but by the way, I could just say my friend John Crossman, right? Like he and I we're really good at relationship building. We had a really great relationship. He's been on the podcast many years ago. He's in the book, but he's had me on his podcast, right?
Right.
So it was like I made the invitation to him like 5 years ago. He didn't have a podcast. I wasn't like angling to be on his podcast. Now I did go see him because I wanted him to be a donor to my organization. Okay. But we talked about this on his podcast. When he was there, he was very honest with me and said, "Look, I got a lot of people walking through my door. I don't want to just be a check writer. If you want me involved in your organization, I want to add value in other ways too. So show me how I can add value rather than just writing a check. Well, I did, and I kept him up to date, and
Cool.
I did, and he ended up writing checks too. But we saw that, hey, he had some skills and things he could come to conferences and talk about and share with us. So that was a way we kind of both added value to each other. But I think that's really important. You got to be genuine in building relationships, genuinely care about people. You articulate that very well in this book. And so as we kind of advance, Ronak, in your so how did you now run Patel Digital?
Yep.
Tell us the broad scope of what that is, what you do on a day-to-day, the type of clients you have, and
Okay.
kind of how it got started.
Absolutely, yeah. So Patel Digital, it started in 2018. Like I said, that first summer we had 3 clients. Besides the social media client I was talking about, I had a local lawyer, an e-commerce store for a local roofing and contracting company, and then a guy at the gym who was launching a commercial cleaning business. So those were my 3 clients that I got right before going to college. And then the following summer of 2019, I started attending these political workshops through a nonprofit that you may know, Leadership Institute.
Oh yeah.
And through that, I was able to get 3 congressional candidate clients at that one workshop, and I was just going to learn and meet people. So I walked away with 3 deals in 3 different states: Virginia, Tennessee, and Florida. So I knew I was onto something and that I should continue with the web development idea. I continued to do more business development locally. I started going to more and more events that I was just genuinely interested in, like political policy events, nonprofit events, and healthcare events and whatnot. So we service now clients in 16 different states. The primary service that we offer is web development and e-commerce development. We do online fundraising for political candidates as well. And most of our clients are in the professional services industry if they're on the business end. So a lot of lawyers, a lot of doctors. And I actually used Patel Digital as a way to meet more doctors and build relationships with people in the healthcare community. And I think this is something unique for my generation, Gen Z, because we're actually able to add value to our mentors because we're digital natives. So while they can teach us industry specific things and give us a lot of wisdom, we can teach them to use tools and take advantage of modern digital tools because we're just simply better than they are. So
yeah, that's a really good point because I think I was going to ask you that too. Like, what can Gen Z and millennials and Gen Z, how can you bring your comparative advantage to the marketplace? It sounds like this is one way to do that. Is, hey, first of all, there are things that older people, and they don't have to be that much older. They can be like 35, 45, 55.
Even millennials,
they're not even. They don't do this. They don't know. Like you have some examples in the book about. I think it was the one you mentioned before, that your friend's dad that was at a law firm.
Yeah.
That, or it was somebody. Anyway, it was like a law firm or something, and I think they were kind of like, what's this like, high school kid coming in and giving me a pitch deck on how they can rebuild my website. And wasn't really sure what to think, and then a couple days later calls you because he had gone through all the stuff you put together for and realized that you actually could do this pretty well.
Yeah. So if I were to give advice on someone, my age asking how they could add value to people, I would say technology is a really good way to start. All of us are digital natives, and technology can mean a wide range of things. It can be super technical stuff like coding and cybersecurity. It can be writing. It can be creating content. So it can be a lot of different things. Explore different things that you like, and I think that's a very solid starting point for your career, because even if you don't end up doing that for the rest of your life, you're able to add value to other people, and you'll be able to break into the industries that you see yourself going into in the future, just like I did with healthcare.
Yeah, so that's a really good point, because it not only are you creating avenues to earn some income, maybe building a website or whatever for somebody, but now you're also building a relationship with people who are much more senior, much more advanced in their careers, have a much larger Rolodex, can probably introduce you to other people, and like we're about to get into, there might be a reason that you're so interested in helping people in the medical field and healthcare professionals. We mentioned this at the top of the podcast. This young man just yesterday, before this interview, found out some news. What was that news?
I just got accepted into medical school.
Fantastic. And have you decided firmly which medical school you're going to go to?
Yes. Yes. So it's a joint MD MPH program between the American University of Antigua and Florida International University in Miami.
So he sends me a text. I got into the American University of Antigua, which looks like Antigua.
Yeah.
Guatemala. It's spelled the same.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my head's rolling.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in Guatemala, as you all know. I spent a lot of time in Antigua. And I'm thinking, where's there an American university in Antigua? I know there's one in Guatemala City, but Antigua. And then I'm like, oh, he means Antigua. We've had this conversation before.
Yeah, right.
I remember you telling me Antigua is a beautiful island in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to come down and visit. I've never been.
No, you will have to.
And then I can say, like, I've been to Antigua.
Yeah.
But that's awesome. And then it's a joint program with Florida International University.
Yeah.
Which is, right down here in South Florida, Miami. In fact, you mentioned all the hospitals that they have connections to, including the one I was born at, Baptist Hospital in Miami.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So FIU, by the way, is located just a few miles from where I was born, Baptist Hospital. Cool. What's also funny...
Yeah, I've never been there.
Another opportunity to plug the book.
Yeah.
No, what's really funny is in Chapter 1, I actually say that the story of this podcast started, in many ways, at FIU.
Wow.
I say that because I didn't start the podcast at FIU.
Yeah.
I didn't walk out of FIU that day in September of, actually it was Constitution Day, September 17th, 2014. Mm-hmm. My friend Jesse Panuccio was giving a speech at an event sponsored by the organization I worked for at the time, the James Madison Institute. And afterwards, there's a young man that was in law school there that came up to Jesse, reminded Jesse that Jesse at the time was the head of he was the director of Florida's Department of Economic Opportunity.
Wow. Sort
of like our labor department, but we have different ways of saying things here in Florida.
Yeah.
And so he says, hey, you met with my father and I, because his father had a private plane company in Italy that they were moving to Southwest Florida. And as the Economic Opportunity Director of Florida, Jesse, I guess, had toured it or something, or met with them. So Jesse says, Francisco, come over here. You need to meet this young man. Davide Proietti is his name. And so we exchanged information. I don't know why Jesse introduced him to me, but he had an interesting American dream story as well. He was an Italian immigrant, literally himself, coming here to help his father move their family business here. Very successful family in Italy, because they had a lot of regulatory issues in Italy that were really making it very difficult for them to run a business anymore. So I didn't really know this. I met Davide. We exchanged information. I said, hey, the next time in Miami, let's meet up. Well, it was a few months later, but this is part of the relationship building. Mm-hmm. I reached out to him. He was still a law student. It wasn't like I had a development opportunity, but maybe his dad owns a private plane company. Yeah. I don't know. But always like meeting interesting people. So he recommends we go to this Italian restaurant in downtown Miami that he picked out.
Cool.
We had a great conversation, great Italian food, great Italian wine.
Yeah.
And I hear his entire story, and it was amazing. And I walked out of that meeting like many other types of meetings with really interesting people, thinking, I wish more people could hear this person's story.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many times I must have said that to myself over a few years.
Right.
And the next day I was driving around South Florida and I was thinking about Davide's story. And I was thinking that, man, I really wish more people could hear this person's story. And as I was having that thought, I was turning on a podcast.
Right.
And the little light of Agents
Right.
of Innovation went off in my head. And I said, maybe I could have a podcast.
It's possible, yeah.
So that's chapter 1. That actually is where it starts. Florida
Wow.
International University.
That's awesome.
And
love
I
it.
really, one thing I want to get back to with you related to Davide is this mindset of opportunity that I like to dub, and many people like to dub, the immigrant mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that in that I try to help people through the Fearless Journeys community, through this podcast, in building an entrepreneurial mindset. But the more immigrants I meet, and the more immigrant stories I hear, like that of your parents, like Davide, like, you know, and people, and we in the U.S., a lot of us Americans who have been here, like my dad's an immigrant, but a lot of us who have been here for a while. My dad's from Cuba.
Wow.
We live in a much more we are born into a much more comfortable society.
Mm-hmm.
Now there are definitely many people born here that are not growing up in comfortable situations.
Of course.
For sure. But we have a lot of things here in the United States that we maybe take for granted. Even many people like myself who might complain about, you know, government intervention, government regulation, you know, all these things, maybe we're losing some of our freedoms and liberties, and you know, we complain about some of these things. But the immigrant walks into this country, and to me, for many, just sees nothing but opportunity.
Absolutely.
So, tell me a little bit about the immigrant mindset idea there, maybe how your parents approached it, and maybe if they instilled anything in you, and how you look at the United States of America.
I mean, I think that, well, what's interesting is that America is actually a country filled with immigrants, and most of our ancestors are immigrants. I just think that a lot of people are far removed from their families' immigrant stories, so they don't have that immigrant mindset. But I think immigrants know what it's truly like in other parts of the world, the lack of basic freedoms, the lack of economic opportunity. And whether you're a liberal or conservative, I mean, we really do have it good here. I mean, of course, America's not perfect, and there's things that we want to do to improve it. But ultimately, America is, I think, the best place for opportunity in the world. And even in the digital age, I think it's easier than ever to start a business. And I think that as a first-generation American, I saw my parents struggle and hustle and their journey, and I knew that I wanted to make something of myself in this country because of all the opportunities and because of all the things that were possible. I looked up to all sorts of tech entrepreneurs and whatnot. I looked up to my parents, and I just knew that I wanted to do something, and I didn't want to let the American dream go to waste. You know?
Yeah, well, that's a great plug, right? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, that's the reason I titled the book The American Dream, well, there's a lot of reasons, but the American Dream is a terrible thing to waste, as I really do think like it is. Yeah. And you know, I got to just spend an amazing year in Guatemala, and there's a lot of people doing great in Guatemala, but obviously most of the people in the country are living in poverty. And
and I've been there.
And I think it's a country on the rise still, so it's not even that, you know, I think it's, I just tell, you know, if you look at where does Guatemala fall in the scheme of the whole world, they're probably like right in the middle in terms of like, well, you know, I think top 10% of people in Guatemala are doing very well. They're doing as well as anybody in the United States. I think maybe the next 20 to 30% are doing pretty well. And then you got that bottom kind of 50-ish% that are in poverty, that are not too well. But I think, you know, when you compare to a lot of places around the world, I mean, places like sub-Saharan Africa, places, a lot of places in India,
Yeah,
and places
absolutely.
in Asia, other places in Asia. Even though, you know, so many people have come out of poverty in places like China, still a lot of people are in poverty, right?
Yeah.
So we have so much opportunity, and I just, in some ways, we shouldn't take it for granted. But the other thing is, there's another element to the American economy. You kind of referenced this a little bit. So today, I would say that there's a number of Americans who, maybe rightfully so, are seeing jobs disappear. Maybe they're manufacturing jobs. Maybe they've gone overseas. Maybe they've been automated or digitized. So they're seeing, if you see a factory close in your small town in Pennsylvania or Ohio or wherever, you literally see jobs disappearing. Maybe your father worked there. Maybe he worked there his whole life and now he's just lost his job, right? So there's that element that I think, you know, is right to recognize and right to say, hey, these jobs aren't here anymore. But something, you know, we've talked about and you referenced is there's a lot more opportunities in the digital economy. We also, like, we were just having lunch before this, and we were talking about, I was trying to inform him, since I'm about 20 years older than him, about 20 years ago, it was expensive to make a long distance call, like on a landline, which you don't even, like, most people don't. I don't have a landline anymore. Nobody had, like, a lot of people don't have landlines anymore. But it was like very expensive, and now I can carry around a phone, make a video call. Maybe your parents can make a video call to India.
Yeah.
They couldn't make that call before when they got here.
Absolutely not.
They might have written a letter. There wasn't even an email then, right? Maybe they were just starting to be email around the time after they got here. But you didn't have, like, a portable computer.
Nope.
We certainly didn't have podcasts.
Yeah.
I've got my computer up, my phone up, microphones up. I'm able to, you know, within an hour after putting this together, I could, if I want, upload this to the internet for the whole world to see.
Absolutely.
We could have been streaming this live on Instagram or TikTok.
Yeah, absolutely.
The massive amount of communications we have now at almost no cost, like very, very little cost, is just astounding. And the fact that you're talking about, you can open a business online in Florida. You could probably open a business in about 30 minutes.
Yes, Sunbiz, or whatever it is.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, you do have to wait for, like, a thing to come by email in a couple days, but the fact of the matter that you can do this.
But the actual work only takes under an hour.
Yeah, it's really
state.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Really amazing. And you don't have to have a brick and mortar store, right? You can work from anywhere. I could actually work pretty much from anywhere.
Yeah.
Today, you know, thankfully to our friends here at Strike Cigar Lounge, thanks to Chris Hayes, particularly the manager here, we were given a podcast studio.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, in a sense, right? I mean, I brought in my equipment and things like that, but we have space here. You can always find a space when you need to do something like this. So thank you, Chris, and I'll be patronizing him plenty of times here with my habits. You know, so, but anyway, it's really nice to do that, and that actually is a testament to relationship building too. You know, I don't know. Chris used to work at another cigar lounge.
Right.
A friend of mine, Bob Rubin, who's been on this podcast, you know, probably was the first person to invite me to that cigar lounge. He was certainly the first person to invite me here to Strikes, and Bob's a relationship guy too, and he met Chris.
Yeah. Through
Chris, he said, "Oh, you got to meet Francisco." You know, we hit it off. Chris came to the Fearless Journeys launch party when we did that over a year ago in Palm Beach. He showed up with cigars. He didn't have to do that. Well, you know what? When you're a relationship guy like Chris, people like me want to actually stop going to the cigar lounge you used to work at and start coming to the one that you work at now. And by the way, huge difference. Like, you could see that an agent of innovation like Chris, you know, makes a difference in a place. He makes you feel welcome home. You're his friend. Francisco, you want to do a podcast? We have a room for you. Right? He actually offered that to me a long time ago.
Wow.
Never took it up until today.
Awesome.
And then I texted him yesterday, like, hey, can I call it that favor? But I think that's what happens when you build authentic, genuine relationships.
Absolutely.
People show up for one another.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that's great. So you've created, and by the way, just moving back to that digital conversation, all those great opportunities the digital environment allows. So anytime, you know, something becomes digitized, automated, there's certainly things that are lost. This is, I guess you could say, both the opportunity and the challenge of capitalism, right? was it? I think it was Joseph Schumpeter, the economist, who has this term, creative destruction.
Yeah.
Right? Because when a society no longer does something productively, or when they figure out a way to do something more productively, that old way gets destroyed.
Yeah. And I think the economic term is called structural unemployment. There's different types of unemployment, and that type of unemployment is when your skills are no longer needed in the market and other skills are needed. But yeah, I think overall digitalization, capitalism is good for the overall economy because it makes people's lives easier. It makes it easier to do business overall.
Yeah, and look, I know a lot of people will complain about, say, a company like Amazon. Like, oh, Amazon is, destroying brick and mortar stores. Well, in a lot of ways, brick and mortar stores are a kind of relic anyway. There are always going to be, we're in a brick and mortar cigar lounge right now. Because there are times that I can order cigars online.
Yeah.
But sometimes I want to come to a cigar lounge and actually hang out with people.
Yeah.
In this kind of environment where I can also, meet people socially and go somewhere out with my friends rather than just, sitting at home and smoking a cigar by myself.
Mm-hmm.
There's times for that too, but also I might say, hey, I could buy those cigars and meet at my friend's house. I could buy them online for maybe half the price.
Right.
But it's nice when you can actually go somewhere and patronize a business when you want to. So there's always going to be a role for brick and mortar. People need to go places.
Yeah.
But there's also, Amazon didn't necessarily destroy the brick and mortar. They're replacing what people want. And what's interesting, though, is they also create opportunities. How did you publish this book?
Yeah, so I self-published. I launched my own publishing company so I could control the copyright and
by the way, great
control
name
the process.
Of your company. It is Innovation Publishing.
Innovation Publishing, yeah, that's the name of the holding company. So basically, I figured out that the only advantage of going to a big publisher like HarperCollins or random Penguin House is if you're already a known figure and they're going to give you a big advance. Otherwise, you're going to get maybe $1 or $2 per book. And they're not even going to do any marketing for you anyway, and they're going to control almost every aspect of your book. And I knew that I could take my skills from web design, and book formatting wouldn't be that much different in terms of a skill set. I would just need to learn a new software, and I learned that new software package from Amazon in like about a day. I made the Word document. I made some mistakes in the publishing process that I'm going to fix for this upcoming book.
Learn by doing.
But exactly, right. And I was able to publish it and put it on Amazon pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you just said the magic word, Amazon.
Yeah.
That's also how I published my book, right?
Yeah,
so Amazon they're one avenue that makes this possible, but because they're ubiquitous, they're everywhere, and just about everybody has an Amazon account. I could put it out there, you could put it out there, you could tell your friends, buy it on Amazon, and in 2 clicks, by the way, you can go to Amazon right now. In 2 clicks, you can buy either of these books very fast, and how do they get to you? Like, they're there in like 2 days.
If you have Prime, it's 2 days, 2
days, free shipping. If you don't have Prime, maybe 4 or 5 days, a week.
2 clicks, 2 days.
You don't have to go anywhere, you don't have to leave the house. I mean, it's the fact that we live in such a convenient, comfortable society now that was made possible through, market capitalism, And yes, there are things that go away. Yeah. Because of that creative destruction. Yeah. And what was the term? Structural unemployment or something?
Yeah, that's the economic term for it.
Yeah, so it's like, because this is how things develop, and then it creates opportunities.
Overall, it's a good
young
thing for the
whippersnappers
economy.
like yourself to come along at. You were doing this in high school. 21, you're publishing a book about your entrepreneurial experiences. 23, you're sitting here on your first podcast, the Agents of Innovation podcast, and so it's very exciting. So let's see. We've talked about a lot of things. Ronak, how can people find you?
Yeah, so Instagram, I post on Instagram almost every day. My handle is at Real Ronak Patel, Real RONAK PATEL.
Great, and I'm going to put all of this in the show notes, so wherever platform you're listening or watching on, you could go right over to the show notes, and we'll put all of his websites, handles. The guy makes a lot of great websites out there, and pretty fast, pretty slick. He'll work with whatever your brands are, so I think, really think about that. And he's going into the healthcare field now, going into medical school. And are you still, so you talked to me before about you don't just want to be a healthcare professional, you also want to be a healthcare entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
So let's take the last few minutes of this podcast here and look to the future.
Okay.
The future Dr. Ronak Patel.
Yeah.
It's going to take many years to get that title probably.
Yeah.
Tell me the journey you're about to embark on, and then what maybe medical specialties you're looking at, and how you want to maybe run your own business in that area.
Yeah, right. So, like I said, I'll be pursuing my medical doctorate and master's in public health. I should be able to get those in 6 years, so I'll be about 29, and that's when I'll officially be a doctor. And then,
by the way, let me pause and say, this is like if life goes smooth in every way that you want it. We never know how life is going to go. But,
exactly.
But let's hope this is his goal. 29.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And then residency. In terms of specialties, I did cancer research last summer at Johns Hopkins, and I really enjoyed oncology. And I also enjoyed
helps with people with cancer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then I also shadowed a orthopedic surgeon there, which I enjoyed as well. So those are two specialties I'm interested in. Both of those basically require 6 years of residency where you're paid a salary, but it's government funded, so it's not your full earning potential yet. And then after that, I'll probably be like 35. That's when I would want to open up my own practice. And during residency or even during med school, I still plan on doing some sort of consulting to healthcare companies to sort of bridge medicine and technology and entrepreneurship and even policy, and see what I can do from a consulting perspective at the intersection of all that. That'll sort of keep me in the game of entrepreneurship while also earning additional income while I'm a resident. But yeah, I definitely want to enter healthcare, but I want to enter it as an entrepreneur. I don't want to work for a mega healthcare corporation. I want to create change in the healthcare industry because I think there's a lot of need for improvement in terms of prevention focus, in terms of better marketing, in terms of better insurance and payment solutions, better customer service, better technologies. I think there's a lot of issues that I see as an entrepreneur that I could potentially change in that industry.
Well, let me tell you, we need some major innovations in all those areas in healthcare. So I hope you are one of the agents of innovation in healthcare to do it. Also, I really want to commend you all the relationships you've built with medical professionals, the internships that you did at Johns Hopkins. You've taken a lot of steps here to build relationships, learn before you totally jump into something. And kind of see it firsthand. I also can tell you have a great entrepreneurial mind for healthcare because did you hear he's thinking about two different specialties. One deals with cancer, and unfortunately cancer's got a lot of people affected with it, and so you're going to have a lot of business, unfortunately, in some ways. But a lot of people that need your help. And then you've also got, you're thinking about orthopedic surgery. And let me tell you, I think my dad can tell you, and a lot of other people that are aging can tell you. South Florida down here could use a lot of orthopedic surgeons. All right, whatever backs, knees, whatever, all sorts of joints, right? So you're picking two fields here where you're probably going to do well in, no matter which area you go to. But also, I want to mention, so you're also a graduate of Penn State University, and also, in addition to some of the internships and things, I remember when I was going to Guatemala, and I can't believe it took us to the very end of the interview to get to this, that you've been to Guatemala.
Yeah, I have.
And when did you go? How many times? And what did you do there?
Okay. Yeah, I've only been there once. It was for about a week. It was January of 2021, I want to say. And January of 2021. And the reason I was there is
So it was right before I moved there.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah.
March of 2021.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So the reason I was there is I was doing a medical mission trip through the nonprofit organization Global Brigades. Amazing
what are they
organization. Called? Global Brigades.
Global Brigades.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And basically they set up and they don't just do healthcare stuff. They do economic empowerment. They set up legal clinics. They set up banking systems.
Wow.
But the first thing they usually focus, so it's a very holistic model, which I really appreciate it, especially as a person that appreciates the economic and policy side of things too. But the first things that they do is they work on public health systems and basic health care, and then they go on to things like economic development, legal empowerment, and so on. So I did a mission trip, and mine was focused on healthcare. So for 3 days, we set up clinics in rural parts where we checked people's blood pressures, vitals, and glucose levels. The biggest things people were diagnosed with, similar to here, is hypertension and type 2 diabetes. So we were able to prescribe medication to them and give them the medical care that they need, as well as the public health education as well. And 2 days the 2 days before that, the interesting part about that brigade for me was that it was the first time the organization was actually doing a mission trip in that country. So we were sort of like the guinea pigs, and we got to do a lot of different public health stuff and whatnot. And I remember the 2 days leading up to the clinic, we actually visited where people lived and surveyed like the architecture, the stoves, the water systems, to like really get a sense of like how these people are living and how these like dangerous fumes and maybe unhealthy water that might have parasites in it can affect their healthcare needs. So I thought that was a really cool experience.
That's awesome. Well, do you remember where in Guatemala you were?
Yeah, so Tecpan, Chimaltenango.
Yeah. Okay, I haven't been there specifically, but I've heard a lot about it. So so that's really great. And the other thing I really liked in that with Global Brigades does is they look at the whole public healthcare like as a system. You know, I can't remember the exact episode, 98, 99, somewhere around there. I had a man named Dr. Tom Fane. You need to read his books and connect with him. He's in Roanoke, Virginia.
Cool.
We still haven't met in person. We did the podcast over Zoom.
Yeah.
But he, for the last 25, 30 years, has gone to Haiti.
Wow.
The first time he went, well, he's a doctor. And the first time he went was with some group, and, you know, they just needed him. And he was just in the doctor's office all day because when you bring a doctor to Haiti, like, the line is down the street every day.
Yeah, of course.
And he didn't even get to experience the country. So he went back, experienced the country, then has gone back like 50 times in 25 years, something ridiculous. I read his book that he put out a few years back, but one of the things he realized very early, he was like, okay, when we're bringing a doctor like me in for like a day, we're like solving a few people's problems like that day. There's a massive, bigger problem that needs to be solved. It's like
what's causing those issues to begin with.
He said before I donate money or ask people from the United States to throw all this money into Haiti, we need to figure out the systemic problem here. And so it's an amazing conversation we had. You know, it's interesting. We had that conversation shortly before Haiti just really plummeted in the last year or so. into some really even darker times. So hopefully things will reemerge. But he was specifically tied to a particular village in Haiti, a particular
Wow, I love
people,
that.
a particular church, and they built a healthcare system and an education area, and it was really great. And they actually built a system so that people themselves could have an educational communications between the different neighbors in the community. So
Cool.
I really like that Global Brigade seems to be taking a similar approach.
Yeah.
And everything that you're doing, and oh my gosh, we just had this hour-plus podcast with a 23-year-old. I've had a few people around his age on that just continue to impress me. But to think about all the things he's done, you could buy Ronak's book, Generation Startup, Become the CEO of Your Life. You're working on another book already. I got to keep up with you, Ronak. I mean, I got a book here, but I got to keep up with you. I'm a little older. But can you, let's close this podcast. Could you, just some parting advice, maybe for people your age, maybe any age, whatever, on anything, if they're looking to become the CEO of their life?
Sure.
Maybe this has to do with entrepreneurship, maybe it's even broader, but what would be some of your biggest advice to them?
Yeah, I think my parting advice would be, you're living this life, most likely in this country, you have these opportunities around you. I think if you want to live a life with purpose, you should try to do something that you enjoy and do it around people that you enjoy working with. And I also think a lot of people spend time overthinking and thinking about all the different possibilities that they could be doing. And I would say to those people, just execute, try something. You're always able to pivot and adapt. But I think just doing what you really enjoy and taking action will help you lead a more purposeful life.
Well, I don't know if this man's read my introduction yet, but that's one of the number one things I think entrepreneurs do is they are people of action. And as somebody told me, one of the reasons I even named this book, The American Dream is a Terrible Thing to Waste, somebody sent me an email. The story's in the conclusion. And they said, Francisco, I was thinking about you this weekend, and I was thinking about how a dream is a terrible thing to waste. And I put my head down on the table and I said, that's it, I'm going to start this business. Fearless Journeys is where I went. But I thought about, when I was thinking about writing this book, somebody heard me tell that story to them about what my friend Neil Freeman had sent to me in that email, a dream is a terrible thing to waste. And this was my friend Tom Gatens, who lives in Tampa.
Right.
And Tom said, I think you have the title of your book. I said, what's that? That email that Neil sent you, a dream is a terrible thing to waste. And I said, I like that. You know why I like that? Because a dream is only a dream and unless you take action. If you don't take action, it merely remains a dream. And you just ended this with, you got to take action. You got to execute. Just go do things. And things you'll figure out what you maybe don't want to do, and you'll figure out
exactly
maybe what you're good at. And
you'll figure it out as you go.
Yeah, and so that's amazing. So you are still figuring it out as you go.
Absolutely.
You're only 23, but
I don't think I'll ever stop. Yeah, I don't think I'll ever stop.
And you've done a lot of incredible things so far. So, Ronak, I want to thank you for being an agent of innovation. And thanks for having me on the Agent of Innovation podcast. I also want to remind our listeners and viewers, remember you could watch us on YouTube if you're just listening. Maybe you already got through it. But go to YouTube and subscribe for the next one. Also, make sure you subscribe on whatever platform you're listening or watching on. Comment. Let us know what you think about Ronak's story, what you think about my line of questioning. Maybe I need to shut up and let the guest talk a little bit more. Whatever you want to tell me. Yeah. But make sure you rate it, share it, subscribe to it, and do all those fun things that we got to do to boost the ratings and get Ronak's story and the story of all the different other agents of innovation like him out to more people. So thank you again, Ronak, for being on the Agents of Innovation.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.